Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Sage, the Executive Director of the area, and I'm here with Mike Griffin. And we're latest kind of thought leadership talk, our fireside chats. I'm really excited to have one of the leading thinkers and thought leaders in the AR and wider space. So, Mike, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
It's a long history. I have a long history with XR. I started development of my very first system in 1996 as an undergraduate project. Sorry, 1986 as an undergraduate project. It was my university thought it was such a great idea. They didn't know what to call it because this is before virtual reality was even coined as a term. And they said, why don't you stay on and do a PhD? So I've been involved with VR, telepresence, augmented reality, mixed reality for longer than I care to think about, and when I had hair. And I've built systems as diverse as training systems for radiological training for first responders and people in the radiation industry. I've built systems for training fire commanders using virtual reality for simulated incidents. The latest thing I'm into is additive manufacture and looking at how augmented reality will allow you to see what it is you wish to print before you go ahead and press the button, because it takes a long time to print something. And if you get it wrong, well, it can be expensive. And worse than that, it can delay important operations. If it's a spare part, you printed the wrong part, or the part's not printed to the right tolerance, or any number of other things, and you've got a very expensive platform like a ship, a plane, or something, pretty embarrassing. So long history, many projects.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough to see your the latest Augmented Solutions piece of work. It's great. I think in its ease, simplicity, but also, like you say, the ROI, the kind of savings that companies are going to have. So look forward to hearing a bit more about that. But now I've got you on the kind of fireside chat with the area, I want to ask you a few questions. And the first one is, you see, we're starting it in 2023 now. What has been the kind of the big technology stories in 2022 in AR, in your eyes?
A number of them. So I think the big one for me has to be, in terms of hardware, is Microsoft and HoloLens 2. I am relieved that recently, because there's a big doubt over all of that, and I'm relieved that there are noises coming from within Microsoft that there's going to be a HoloLens 3. It's probably still, to my mind, one of the most solid systems for industrial use. You've got Vuzix, of course, and Vuzix Shield, which is fantastic for hands-free working in an industrial environment. So that's very exciting. And there's new announcements at CES, I believe, of a lightweight version, which I can't wait to see and get my hands on. And of course, the metaverse, goes up and goes down in people's opinion. My view of the metaverse has always been that it will come, it will take time, it'll be slower, it'll have less impact in the short term to medium term, but in the long term, it will be business as normal. But I think it's quite a long time. I think 10 years, maybe longer. As I said, I've been in augmented reality and virtual reality for a very long time, and this is, I think, the third or the fourth cycle where this has burst onto the scene. Oh, it's going to change the world, and strangely enough, it hasn't. So for a number of reasons.
I agree, and I think one of the things that we all need within the industry is kind of more choices and different hardware solutions. I think it's fair to say, I don't know about your thoughts, but in terms of kind of the use cases, things are becoming, I wouldn't say mature is probably the wrong word, but companies are beginning to understand, they're beginning to implement the technology, and with supporting hardware, be it assisted or augmented. But your kind of thoughts on where we are in terms of AR use cases at the moment, what would you say we're getting better?
Definitely. So if you look at almost any other industry, if you take computing, for example, mobile computing or laptops or industrial computing, you'll find that there are different form factors depending on what you wish to do. And you're going to see that with augmented reality. So it's like saying, I have a computer. Okay, what kind of computer have you got? What are you using it for? So a battlefield system, which has to be used in bad weather conditions, using gloves, you're not going to word process Excel spreadsheets on it. And I think that's where you're going to get to. So you're going to find that, I hope, in fact, you're already seeing it, that augmented reality is the technology needs to wrap around the use case. So you can't use, for example, a MetaQuest Pro with pass-through for a hands-free operation, I would argue, in an industrial scene, because you need to see the real world around you. And so but by similar circumstances, there are certain things that pass-through systems can do that waveguide-based systems don't do very well.
Yeah.
So it's horses for courses, and I think you have to recognize that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think getting the right kind of solution for the right problems it's always been crucial. And that probably nicely takes me on to the kind of the second question as well, because we've spoken before, and I know the kind of area members, it's about solving business problems. It's not just technology for technology's sake. And I know you're kind of really interested in the impact of some of the kind of AI platforms and solutions that are coming in, and what the impact that has on the metaverse and AI going forward. Maybe you can kind of add that a little bit, what you've seen in the industry and where you think that's going to
go. We've reached actually, that to me is the big story. Although it hasn't filtered through to VR, AR, XR yet, it will do soon. So I've experimented with both ChatGPT, stable diffusions, a number of stable diffusion systems, and there are other solutions out there which are extremely interesting. And one of the problems has always been, if you go into a virtual world, for example, it's incredibly difficult to populate a rich environment with a lot of content. If you get a person to do it, it's expensive. So how long does it take you to design a chair? How many different sorts of chairs do you need? And that's just one class of object. And we're surrounded by thousands of different sorts of objects and very, very complicated, rich environments. And if you want the metaverse to have its own reality, it's got to be rich. And so making these worlds rich, beautiful looking, sort of the quality of Ready Player One, for example, you are going to require some really clever tools to do that. And AI is fantastic. It appears to have some very fantastic abilities to provide the content side of it. So right now there's a Mid-Journey and it said techniques called Stable Diffusion have been used to produce 2D images, and people are now already using it daily to produce images for websites. I've been using it recently to create mock-ups. So for me, I can just type in a bit of text and say, I wish to create a mock-up that does this. I want a chemical plant. I want it orange. I want to have a background. I want to have a CGI overlay. And in 5 minutes, I can produce a pretty complicated looking mock-up that I can show a client that saves me hours of work on OmniGraffle or Photoshop. So that's one class of it. Looking at the more complicated piece, which is the behavior that sits behind it. So you've got a pretty world, but it doesn't do anything. And the more difficult challenge is the doing something, making it interactive, making it real. And again, particularly with ChatGPT, for limited use cases, people have shown how clever you can be in writing bits of code. So you can, again, put in some text and say, I want you to use one of the Java-based 3D platforms. The name I forget, I'll come to me in a minute. And you can get it to write you a piece of Java, which will create a viewer, create a mouse look, create a bouncing ball, texture it, and you do that with text describing it, and then it writes the program. Yeah. So it won't do all of it, but it can do quite a lot of heavy lift already, which is to me is staggering.
Yeah, which I think is amazing. We've got some of the kind of, if you like, simple, low-hanging fruit when it comes to AI use cases, things like remote assistance and stuff like that. And that's great. And there's been a huge need as we go through COVID But now I think companies are going, well, that's kind of great, but what do I do next? And I think your kind of comments about the focus on the content, which is really important, and being able to create that, say, quickly, accurately, cheaply, will kind of take some of these use cases into the next level, or allow them to do the next set of use cases. So I think that combination, we talked a little bit about the headset and the hardware needing to improve. Okay, we're now kind of talking a little bit about the kind of content and the way that we can kind of improve that as well, are a couple of key things, as well as that I still see things about human behavior and security and safety being some of the things that the area focuses on helping overcome some of those barriers to
Cool.
adoption. Yeah, which are the
Okay.
big areas.
You're okay. So you've opened up a whole set of can of worms. So just to finish off the conversation on AI, I actually believe that the ability to produce mock-ups or half a design or a third of a design by using text prompts quickly and then customizing by a human is going to be, in a very short period of time, I'm talking 18 months, 2 years, it's going to have a big impact. It won't replace content authors, but what it will enable you to do is use their time and energy more effectively. And the quality of the experience that you'll generate, which is really important to generate a sense of presence. You need a rich, complicated world, and that will help to address things. I actually think the hardware is going to be slower than the software side. I think AI is going to go rocketing past, and then we're going to still have heavier than we would like, more limited views than we would like, less battery power than we would like, less comfortable than we would like headsets for some time to come. I still think we've got several iterations on the hardware before we get to something that's really going to, there are use cases that we've talked about. Remote assistance is a good one. Training is a good one. Seeing invisible risks is a good one. Route planning is a good one. The whole bunches of different use cases that you could do best using augmented reality, or you can't do any other way, which is really important. So the 3D printing one, it's really difficult to do it any other way than the way that we're designing it in Augmented Solutions. But if you really want to be successful, you've got to take existing business processes and replace them with AR, and that's much harder. And I think that's one of the challenges we've got going forward. Of the challenges, and security, and interoperability, and open standards.
And I agree, but actually, through my work with the area and actually speaking to the likes of some of the area members, the Boeings, the Raytheons, the Newport News Shipbuilding, they are having great success stories. It's still a challenge to deploy it, but they're able to work around it and creating some real kind of savings within their organization. And ultimately, it's about either making money or saving money. If we get to the real at the moment, especially as this year 2023, it'd be interesting to see what happens from a macro environment. But companies that are out there to be able to improve their performances and efficiencies within the company, then AR is definitely a great way forward.
A couple of points that are worth, I think, considering. I saw an old video on YouTube from Steve Jobs, who is a great inspiration for me, as you can tell by the way I dress. That's just something nice to wear. But so Steve talked. This is 20 years ago, and he compared those businesses that a successful business that's growing greatly versus a business that's not so successful, and how much they spent on IT technology. And what Steve noted, or the reports had noted then, was that both sets of organizations, the less successful versus the more successful, were spending the same amount of money on IT, roughly 3.5% of revenue. But what he noted was the ones that were very successful were spending the 3.5% of revenue on things that would improve their business processes, as opposed to things that would help them manage their business. So quite a difference. So in other words, things that sped up production, things that optimized production, things that reduced loss. And there is a tendency to say, oh, we can use augmented reality, let's use it for spreadsheets. But using augmented reality, as you say, for a remote working, remote expert, all that kind of stuff. Compare the two. There's a much greater return on investment for using that
Agreed.
technology
Yeah.
in helping your existing business work better. And that I would, if anybody's trying to do a startup, try and make the world a better place from making things and what matters to companies, rather than something you think is a good idea.
I couldn't agree more. I think actually that's probably a pretty good place to leave it as well, Mike, in terms of, I think we've covered some really great stuff, had a look at what's happened, had a look at the kind of future, made it clear that any kind of solution needs to create ROI and benefit within the organization. So listen, thank you very much for our time. I know we're going to continue to work together, and any kind of feedback will be great, both from the area of Mike's perspective. And thank you very much for your time, sir.
No problem. Okay.